Hi everybody, welcome to the video. Today we're going to be looking at how to fit Hornby TTS decoders into Bachmann locomotives. Specifically, we're looking at the class 47 because I've had a request from Tony, who is interested in fitting a few of these Bachmann locos, and I believe he's got quite a few to do. So I'll just give you a few ideas of how I get the best performance out of the TTS decoders. So first of all, as I said, if you watch the last video on the class 31, the Hornby class 31, likewise, the first thing I would do with any TTS decoder is to upgrade the speaker. You'll be amazed at the transformation really of the sound, and speakers I tend to use are speakers from Roads and Rails, and the particular ones that I happen to use, this is the standard iPhone speaker, that is a small iPhone speaker, and that is a small bass speaker. Now they're all 8 ohms, and it's very important that you do use 8 ohm speakers with TTS decoders. If you use 4 ohm speakers, and I did it once to my cost, you can blow the amp on the speaker if you turn the volume up too much, and also they're too loud. Because I find that a single speaker is too loud even on TTS decoders, even if you turn the CV 182 down to 1, to me the sound is still too loud on a TTS decoder. The way I get around that is to fit 2 speakers into every locomotive, but they must be fitted in series, and there's a little diagram there of how to fit 2 speakers to 1 decoder. So your red wire comes out your TTS decoder, it goes into the plus of the speaker, then you run another wire from the minus of the first speaker into the plus of the second speaker, and then you run the third wire from the minus of the second speaker back into the decoder. And that is how to wire your speakers, your 2 speakers, in series. The wire I tend to use, because these speakers here, that one is pre-fitted with the 2 wires, which is really useful. But your iPhone speakers, they need to have wires soldered, and the wires I tend to use are specially made for decoders, and I get these from Layouts for You, with special decoder wire, which is very thin wire. Most probably you can get that wire from other suppliers, but it's important to use a thin wire. Okay, so having talked about the speakers, the next problem that you have is that because Bachmann locos have got 21 pin sockets, your Hornby TTS decoders are fitted with 8 pin plugs. So the easiest thing to do is to fit a adapter, and I don't have one to hand, but there's one already fitted onto this locomotive. As I said, a good adapter to buy is the latest Dcc Adapter, which I think you can probably buy from eBay or Roads and Rails, and that adapter just sits onto the 21 pin socket, and then you plug your 8 pin plug from the TTS into the adapter, and that works well. And that adapter is quite slimline, so you don't have any clearance problems. You can actually fit the loco bodies down okay if you've got that adapter. Some of the adapters that you can buy, I think the ones from Bachmann and TCS, I think they're slightly chunkier than those ones, and they don't work very well. The alternative way to do it, and I've done this with a few of them, is to buy a TCS adapter, and that's this one here. I don't know if you can see that one. That's a 21 pin socket to which you solder the 8 wires from the TTS decoder, and that is a very good way of doing it, a very neat way of doing it, that is. The only problem is it might be difficult to source these particular adapters. The TCS adapters I bought from Digitrains in Lincoln, and they sell packets of 5 adapter boards, and I think they work out quite cheap actually. I think they work out to about £3 or £4 each. The code number for TCS adapters is 1358. Now TCS, I checked the internet, TCS is an American firm, and I think it might be a bit difficult to source those adapters, but have a word with Jeremy at Digitrains, and I'm sure he'd be pleased to help you, and I'm sure that he'd probably be able to order those for you. So if you're handy with the soldering iron, the small soldering iron, and I usually use an 18-watt soldering iron, a very fine one. If you're handy with the soldering iron, then really that is the best way to go. Much neater job. It works very well. But for today, we're just going to use this adapter, the Laos adapter, and what I do with these is I always put a strip of sellotape under the TTS decoder, and also put a strip of sellotape under the adapter. And the reason for that is if the body gets pushed down, what you don't want is for any electrical bits to come into bits on the chassis, because that could cause problems. So just run a piece of sellotape underneath the TTS decoder, and as I say, under that one as well. TTS decoders tend to run a little bit warm sometimes, so I don't wrap the decoder. I think the decoder is best to have in as much air around it as possible, to be quite honest. Some people say to run to run some Captain tape or sellotape around the whole decoder. I don't do that, because once I actually did do that and I noticed the decoder was running very, very warm, so I was a bit worried that it would burn out. So now I just leave as much air as I can around the decoder itself. Okay, so before I refit the loco body, I will just show you the speakers. Now the speakers, I always fit 2 speakers. This particular model, I fitted in the tray, in the speaker tray here, I fitted a small iPhone speaker. And here in the roof, I don't know if you can see that, I have fitted in with black tack a standard iPhone speaker, and those two, as I said before, they are actually wired in series. Now I've got a few different Class 47s, Bachmann Class 47s, and although I've used Hornby TTS chips in I think 4 of them, I've actually used different combinations of speakers. And the reason I do that is to give a very slightly different tone to each of the locomotives, because although the sound project is the same, by fitting different speakers you can actually have locos with a very, very slightly different tone. I think if they were all exactly the same, it'd be quite boring. Now I've also got Class 47s as well, with coastal DCC chips, Lego Man Biffo DCC chips, and I've got a Digitrains one as well. Now they're all very good, but if you've got a good few locomotives, as I said before in the Class 31 video, if you've got a good few locomotives to do, then it really pays to fit TTS chips to some of your fleet. Now this video that I'm showing here equally applies to Class 37s actually, because the Class 37 Bachmann, the chassis block on the 37 is the same sort of arrangement. You've got this this metal tray here for your speaker, and beauty of using the small iPhone speakers, or indeed the bass speaker, is that you don't actually have to remove the fan assembly from the locomotive. So now I'm going to fit the body back onto the locomotive, and then we'll talk about the different CVs that I've adjusted when we get the loco back onto the layout. Now you'll see that before I put the body back onto the locomotive, I just got to line it up to roughly how it's going to go on, and just make sure that where I've got the speakers is kind of well away from the plug, and that actually that standard iPhone speaker does snuggle very nicely between the two screw apertures, so there's no problem there. The other thing I was going to say is with regard to the wires. You know, I said that you need to solder the wires to the iPhone speakers. I tend to leave them quite long. And the other thing is, when I join the wires, when I first do a sound fit, I tend to just join the wires together by hand, just twist them together, and wrap them in a little bit of sellotape, just to make sure that they don't touch anything. The reason that I don't solder them and sleeve them initially is because I might not be entirely happy with the sound. So if after a few days I decide to play around and try different speakers, you can literally just pull them apart and then try them again, and then once you're happy, then what I do is then obviously I'll solder the wires together and put a bit of heat shrink over the soldered joins to make a proper job of it, really. But on an initial fit, I just sellotape over the joins. One other little trick I'll just show you before I put the loco body back on Class 47s and 37s, and I think most of the BR diesels, certainly in BR days, their headlights on those locomotives, they weren't bright at all. Certainly the marker lights, I think, were just these two lights here were just fitted with just ordinary bulbs, I think, really. The intensity headlight was brighter, obviously, but with Hornby TTS, one of the disadvantages is that you can't reduce the brightness of the lights. On lock sounds and on Zemos, you can reduce the intensity of the lights by reducing the CVs, but on Hornby you can't do that. So what I do, it's a little trick that I've always done actually, even when I used to run on DC, because I always found that the diesel lights are always far too bright. What I do, now purists will not think very much of this at all, But I just get some ordinary masking tape, not modeller's masking tape, because that's plastic, but I just get ordinary, shall we say, decorator's masking tape. In this case it's brown, and I just cover the LEDs with little strips of masking tape, and then I also actually colour it black to further reduce the brightness. You'll see there I've done that there as well, and it's not a very technical way of reducing the lights, but it works, and that's how I reduce the lights. The other thing is, a lot of these old BR diesels, most of them only had one red tail light. So what I do, I block off one of the red tail light bulbs with a bit of black electrical tape, and the other one, because even that you don't want too bright, I just put a little bit of masking tape over that, and again, if you can see that, yeah, just again covered it and coloured it black. So it's just a little trick that I do when I do all me diesels. People that are expert in electrics will probably fall off their chair either with shock or disbelief probably, but that's the way I do it anyway. So just to get the loco body back on now, sometimes a little bit tricky. What I tend to do is find it a little bit easier just to turn the loco upside down, and that end's gone down alright already. Just push that in a little bit here, and then an old friend of mine, Richard, who's sadly deceased now, gave me a little tip years ago. He always had a butter knife, very thin butter knife with a rounded end, and that you can just get the butter knife between the body and the chassis, and just ease it in. And that one is just a little bit tricky. Just try and, I know that end's gone in alright. That's it. It's clipped in. With these 47s, the clips are very fragile, and of course they get more brittle as the older the model gets, because the plastic gets very brittle. That's it. That's it. And what I do is, another little trick, just get your cheap screwdriver that you get from the pound shop or Wilco's or wherever, the cross-headed screwdriver, and I always keep mine on, my cross-headed one, on a little magnet, strong magnet. So I just pick up my screw like that, just a little trick really, and just straight into the hole. Tighten them up. Don't tighten them too tight. There's sometimes a devil of a job to get them out again. And the ones on the end are quite tricky. Probably cut the video in a minute because I'll probably be dropping this. Okay. That holds it well. If you've got the screwdriver held onto a magnet, holds it well. They're a bit tricky, these ones. You've got to swing the bogey over really. That's it. There we go. Not too tight. So you've got two screws, silver ones, one at each end in the middle there, and then you've got your four black screws under your bogies. Okay, so the next thing I do, once I've fitted the decoder and fitted the speakers, don't put it straight onto the main layout, just in case. Wired the speakers wrong, or maybe the decoder is touching somewhere where it shouldn't or something. Best put it on your program track. because your program track it runs at a much reduced voltage to your main line. So if there's a problem, it won't blow the decoder when you put your loco on your program track. So it's always a good idea to have a separate program track, because that enables you to not only to test your decoders but to read back the values as well, which you can't do on the main. So I'm now going to break the video and pop the loco onto the programming track. Okay, so this is my programming track, and really it's just a length of track which is on a board, which I just lay over the top of the layout, to be quite honest. And I have it completely separate from the layout, and I have it connected with one of these plugs, these chock block connector plugs, or whatever you call them, and I plug that in underneath. Now what I have is the NC power cab, and I have their special switch. So as soon as you with the power cab, as soon as you actually select the program track, program on main, we certainly don't want that. Use program track and enter. What it does, it actually switches all the power off from the main layout and just provides power to the program track, which is ideal. So you can safely put your loco on the programming track. And it doesn't really matter if you've made a mistake in the wiring or whatever, because there's such low voltage on the programming track that it really is a safety feature, really. So once the loco is on the programming track, you can just press 1 for standard programming and wait. Now, if that comes up manufacturer 48, which it does, manufacturer number 48 is Hornby. Once that number comes up, then you know the decoder is working okay, and that the power cab or your digital system is reading the decoder okay. So once you got that, you're on safe ground, really. And then you can actually put the loco onto the main track. But before we do that, I'll just go through a few of the CVs. We'll just set the this one's already been done actually, but I'll just go through it anyway. We'll set up the address, and the short address is always number 003. Activate this address, yes. And it's asking for a long address, and then you just put in whatever number you want, the 4-digit address. In this case I've got 7835 because it's 47835 is this particular loco. So I can actually put it in again, 7835, and enter. Activate the address, you get one for yes. NCE is a very good system, really. And set the configuration, that's if you want the loco to go in normal direction or reverse direction. We have it normal anyway. Motor control, we're fine with that. You just keep coming back, and then you just come out of that, and then 7835. So the loco is now ready, so we can now pop him onto the main line. I'll disconnect my programming track, get rid of that. It looks a bit Heath Robinson. Most of my stuff is Heath Robinson, to be quite honest, but it works. So now I can put that loco now onto the main running line. She's on. Put it along a little bit there. And then we'll just 7835 635 is the code, and then we just press number 1 and she should burst into life. Now just get rid of that programming track. I find it easier to have the programming track separate from the layout. I think it's a lot safer. And before I got the ENC switch, I used to program my locos on the layout, and there'd always be a few locos that I forgot to take off the layout, and I'd end up programming, say, 3 or 4 locos at the same time, which of course caused all sorts of problems. So there we are, that's 7835 now. We'll go through some of the CVs now. CVs to change. Actually, I'll turn that off for a second. Okay. So after you fit your TTS decoder, it's a good idea to change some of the CVs. The main CV to change is CV150. Now, Hornby's default on CV150 is 0. But if you change it to 1, you get a lot better slow speed performance from the motor. Likewise, CV153 and 154, if you change those, and I'll list them, I'll list the CVs that I've used for the 47 below on the video. And if you change CVs 3 and 4 as well, that also helps with the slow speed performance of the model. It's particularly noticeable on Bachmann locos as well. If you don't change any of the CVs, they tend to shudder at very low speed, and it's almost impossible to get smooth starts. But really, if you change those CVs, you will, as long as the loco itself is in good working order, it's best always to check and run them on DC to make sure they're nice and smooth, especially if you buy a second-hand loco. Make sure that loco is working well on DC before fitting any decoder actually, and then you can play about with the CVs to get optimum performance. So with the Bachmann one, I'll fire it up now. It's function 3, function 2, function 13, nice long blast of the horn there, function 14, function 18, and function 9. Those are your horn functions, and I think those Class 47 horns on the TTS are probably as good as any other decoder actually. I'm quite pleased with those. What I was saying earlier on about the volume, that is actually set at volume number 1, which is the quietest volume you can get on TTS, and that is with the 2 speakers fitted. So you can go louder than that, but I've only got a small layout room, so I like to have quite quiet sounds really. But you can go louder than that. The only problem is I've noticed that if you go louder than 2, 3, if you go up to say 4, then some of the sounds, particularly the horns, do sound a bit distorted. So I tend to keep the volumes down. The other thing I was going to say is that with the different combinations of the speakers, say if you've got an iPhone speaker in one end and you've got maybe one of those small bass speakers in the other end, you're going to get the different tones. It's a good idea also to adjust the volumes of some of the horns on the different locos, because that gives a bit of variety as well. And you can do that by changing the CVs as listed in the Hornby instruction sheet. So we'll just take her for a little run now. What I said about the lights, I don't know if I don't want to jiggle the camera around too much, because I've only got it just. Now that's just a slow creep along, just on decoder really. That's on speed step. Speed step 4 at the moment, isn't it? So reduce that down to 3. 2 even. It's an idea anyway. Now that particular class 47, actually, that's been in its box for about 10 years until I got it out this morning, and really that loco needs a good service. To be quite honest with you, it needs running in, because I haven't really that loco is probably, I don't know, 10, 12 years old, and I haven't run it very much on the layout, and to be quite honest with you, I was surprised it ran as smoothly as it did. But if I, in true Blue Peter style, produce another 47, one that I did earlier, I'll actually show you this one. This one's one of the older Bachmann 37s, sorry, 47s. You'll see it's a lot smoother even than this was TTS fitted, of course. And this one, you probably won't notice too much difference, because the camera microphone is useless, to be quite honest. But there is a very, very subtle variation of the tone on this one, because on this loco I've used one of the bass speakers in one end, and I've used an iPhone speaker in the other end. Anyway, you see it actually runs a lot better on because the loco itself has been running properly. So if we go recall here on the power cap, 7148 it is, that's the one. There we go. So folks, that's about it for the video, to be quite honest. I hope you found it useful. I'm going to watch it myself through before I post it, make sure my facts are all right. But thanks very much for watching. All those tips really apply to a 37 as well as a 47. The chassis are basically the same as I said before. Really thanks very much for watching. Appreciate any comments, and thanks very much for Tony for requesting that we do the video on the Class 47 anyway. So I hope you enjoyed it, and any comments will be most welcome. And thanks very much, and we'll see you soon.